3 years ago, I fell asleep on a train to Venice and woke up in Ljubljana, Slovenia. I had never even heard of Slovenia before that moment. Standing on that platform with my suitcase, staring at signs I couldn't read, I thought my European dream vacation was ruined. That accidental detour became the best travel lesson I ever received. But only after I made some spectacularly expensive mistakes that nearly convinced me to give up on European travel entirely. My Venice disaster started months earlier when I booked what I thought was the perfect July vacation. Every guidebook said July was peak season for good reason. The weather would be ideal, all attractions would be open, everything would be perfectly organized for tourists like me. What nobody mentioned was that July in Venice means hotel rooms at €400 per night. Crowds so dense you spend more time looking at the backs of heads than actual architecture, and humidity that makes walking anywhere feel like punishment. I remember standing in St. Mark's Square surrounded by thousands of other tourists, all of us taking the same photograph, all of us miserable in the heat, all of us wondering why this didn't feel like the romantic European adventure we'd imagined. The restaurants had 2-hour waits to serve overpriced tourist food. My hotel was beautiful in photos, but positioned directly in the chaos, with tour groups gathering outside my window at 6 in the morning. By day 3, I was ready to go home. This wasn't Europe. This was some kind of expensive theme park designed to separate tourists from their money as efficiently as possible. But that accidental stop in Ljubljana changed everything. The woman at the information desk listened to my story and smiled knowingly. She said this happened more often than I might think, and that most people who discover Slovenia by accident don't want to leave. She wasn't just being polite. Slovenia, in early autumn, was everything I'd hoped Venice would be. The weather was perfect, warm during the day and cool enough for comfortable walking. Lake Bled looked like something from a fairy tale, but I could actually enjoy it without fighting crowds for photographs. Traditional wooden boat rental cost €14 for the entire day. The famous cream cake at the Park Hotel cost €4 and was worth every bite. I kept comparing costs to what I had just experienced in Venice. The same quality experiences cost a fraction of the price, and the locals seemed genuinely pleased to meet visitors instead of viewing us as walking credit cards. This became my education in what actually works for mature travelers versus what the tourism industry wants to sell us. Over the next 18 months, I made every costly mistake you can imagine. But each failure taught me something valuable about how to travel intelligently instead of just expensively. The biggest revelation was timing. Peak season isn't when Europe is at its best. It's when it's at its most profitable for the tourism industry. I returned to Venice the following September and discovered the city I had fallen in love with through movies and books. The temperature was comfortable, the crowds had disappeared, hotel prices dropped by 60%, and restaurant owners actually wanted my business. September and October became my secret weapons. Perfect weather, authentic experiences, and prices that don't destroy retirement savings. The shoulder seasons offer everything peak season promises with none of the chaos. My second education came from those marathon itineraries that promise you can see the best of Italy in 10 days. I attempted exactly that, visiting 8 cities in 10 days. By day 4, I was living out of my suitcase, exhausted from constant train rides, treating magnificent destinations like items on a checklist to be crossed off and forgotten. These itineraries assume you have the energy and priorities of a 25-year-old backpacker. They create surface-level experiences where you photograph everything but remember nothing. I realized I was spending my vacation recovering from my vacation. Everything changed when I started choosing just 2 comfortable locations for entire trips and exploring from there. I unpacked completely. I found local cafes that became morning routines. I discovered neighborhoods where tourists never venture. From Florence, I took day trips to Siena and Lucca, but returned each evening to familiar surroundings. From Vienna, I explored Salzburg and the Danube Valley, but always came home to my temporary European life. This isn't seeing less of Europe. This is actually experiencing Europe instead of racing through it. Location choices taught me another expensive lesson. Staying 50 meters from the Trevi Fountain in Rome seemed like ultimate convenience until I discovered it meant ultimate expense and frustration. Every meal cost 3 times normal prices because restaurants knew tourists had no alternatives. The streets filled with aggressive vendors, tour groups gathered outside my window at dawn, and I never met a single local Roman. A coffee near the Pantheon cost €6. 2 metro stops away in Testaccio, the same coffee cost €1.50 and came with genuine conversation from locals curious about my travels. The restaurants in Testaccio served food that Romans actually eat, at prices Romans actually pay. European public transportation became my secret weapon. These systems connect authentic neighborhoods to tourist attractions in minutes. They were designed for locals, so they connect you to real life instead of tourist theater. I learned that expensive tours were completely unnecessary once I understood how European systems actually work. I paid €80 for a Vatican tour that rushed me through the Sistine Chapel with 40 other people, spending more time listening to memorized scripts than actually looking at Michelangelo's masterpiece. The Vatican website allows direct ticket booking, avoiding both crowds and tour costs. When I wanted to spend extra time with a particular painting that moved me, I could. When I discovered that incredible wine bar in Prague, I could stay for the evening instead of returning to a tour bus. Food became another education entirely. Eating anywhere near major attractions cost 3 times normal prices for half the quality. That €6 coffee came with attitude and instant powder. But European dining culture offers incredible value when you understand local rhythms. Italians eat dinner after 8 in the evening. Restaurants serving tourists at 6 o'clock are serving tourist food at tourist prices. I learned to walk 10 minutes away from any major attraction before looking for food. Those 10 minutes saved hundreds of euros and introduced me to family-run places where owners shared neighborhood stories and treated me like a temporary neighbor instead of a walking credit card. Packing became its own revelation. I originally brought clothes for every possible scenario, creating a suitcase so heavy I couldn't lift it. European cities have excellent shopping for anything you might need. More importantly, European washing machines mean you can pack half as much and still be perfectly comfortable. I now pack 1 week's worth of coordinating clothes regardless of trip length. The mental freedom of managing reasonable luggage transformed travel from endurance test to actual pleasure. But the most important lesson was shifting from trying to see everything to actually experiencing something. I had been treating Europe like a museum to be conquered rather than a culture to be savored. My photos showed me at famous landmarks, but I had few memories of genuine moments. The shift happened when I stopped measuring trips by countries visited and started measuring them by depth of experiences collected. That afternoon, conversation with a Portuguese winemaker taught me more about European culture than racing through 5 capitals in a week. The most memorable moments can't be scheduled. The elderly couple in Vienna who showed me their favorite cafe. The market vendor in Portugal who taught me to select perfect tomatoes. That evening in Slovenia when locals invited me to join their table and share stories about our different countries. These weren't expensive experiences. They were free moments that became priceless memories. But they only happen when you slow down enough to notice them. My accidental discovery of Slovenia led to real estate research and residency requirements. A 3-bedroom house with mountain views costs around €180,000. The same property in Austria would cost €800,000, and in Switzerland you probably couldn't buy it as a foreigner. Slovenia feels like stepping back to when European travel was about discovery rather than consumption. When locals welcomed visitors because they weren't overwhelmed by them. When you could afford to spend time in a place rather than just passing through. Sometimes the best destinations are the ones you never planned to visit. My travel disasters taught me that European travel after 50 isn't about proving you can keep up with younger travelers. It's about finally having the wisdom to travel in ways that nourish your soul instead of exhausting your body. The Europe I discovered after making all these mistakes is more beautiful, more affordable, and more welcoming than anything I had imagined during those years of dreaming about someday traveling. It's waiting for you too, once you know the difference between tourist experiences and authentic travel.